We'll call our March 12th, 2026 work session in order, or call to order, rather. Can we do attendance roll call?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Here.
Mayor Woodard.
Here.
Councilmember Murray.
Present.
Councilmember Doyle.
Present.
Councilmember Page.
Present.
Councilmember Matsumoto Wright. And Councilmember Sonmore asked to be excused.
Do we have a motion to excuse Councilmember Sonmore?
Move to excuse Councilmember Sonmore.
We have a first. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a first and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That sounded unanimous, and so we'll move forward with Councilmember Sonmore being excused. I don't know why I'm so tongue-tied when we kick this thing off all the time. Call to order. That's a weird expression, I guess. Can we move to number 3, general public comment? Do we have any general public comment?
We do not.
Comment. All righty, then we will move right into 4, presentation on the budget calendar, and that's with our finance director, Sirke. The floor is yours.
I know it does. That's not it.
Never mind.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. Here we go. Okay. Do we have yeah, there we go. Okay. All right, so tonight this year, we're starting the 2027 and 2028 budget process. We're starting this a bit earlier than law requires because I think we have some challenges this year and want to make sure that we give it adequate time and thought. So Caitlin Rinke, she'll be joining me and sharing the presentation. Oh boy.
Thanks. Our purpose today is showing tasks month by month to be clear and transparent through the budget process. Our agenda is to present the budget calendar. And our council, these are the 3 council goals incorporated in the budget process.
So cities are required in Washington State to prepare a budget and have that adopted. And we can either do that annually or biennially. And City of Mountlake Terrace has a biennial budget. So that's a 2-year budget, and I think it makes it a lot easier so we don't have to go through the process every year. So the budget, like I said before, we're starting a lot earlier. Usually it starts in the summer, but we want to make sure that we start early. So we're going through month by month, and a lot of this is internal. This is really for all the departments, but there is a big process at the end of the year. I know most of you have gone through the process, and we'll be in front of you every week. And so today is the first one. We're hitting our deadline. We're having the budget calendar presentation, and that's all that we're doing this month. April is when we really start working on it with the departments, and we send out documents to every department and they start working on their budgets. And we give them several opportunities, and we'll go through those. We also have a community meeting. We're planning on having 3 community meetings, and the first one will be at the end of April. And then by the end of April will be all the preliminary budgets from the departments are due to finance. And I know it looks like they only have a couple of weeks to work on the budget, but this is just preliminary. We kind of get to know each other during the budget process. We discuss the budget. It's just what's important to them, what's important to us. So it's very preliminary. Then in May, we have meetings with all the departments, and we have 2 more community meetings. These will be in different places. I know one of them is in the council chambers, and the information will be on our website where they are. And then in June, we have the department revisions, the meetings that we had with the departments. They're due to, all the revisions are due to finance, and then in June, we also have meetings. So this is kind of their second chance, and we'll have discussions on those. Then in July, we let the departments work on finalizing their budgets into August. So they have quite a bit of time, and they have time for questions and meetings with finance, with the city manager and the deputy city manager, and so that's giving them quite a bit of time. Again, all of this is pretty early. I do want to point out the asterisks in each of these, where you'll see them toward the end of the year. Those are required. Those are RCWs, and they are required by law. There's a deadline for all of them, and again, we're a lot earlier than what the deadline is, but just so you know that we are required. Those steps are absolutely required. End of August, we have a review with the city manager and deputy city manager, and they are able to, at that point, make decisions, anything that they want to see that's different, and then it will pass back to the departments.
And then in September, the finance director will present the final preliminary department budgets to the city manager and deputy city manager. And October is when we begin presenting department budgets to you guys, to council. The preliminary budget is available to the public, and notices of public hearings go out. All of these are RCWs. November budget requires 2 public hearings on the budget and 1 on property tax. There will be a property tax presentation prior to the public hearing and vote, as it's due to the county assessor and Snohomish County Council by November 30th. And then December is council consideration and potential vote on the final budget.
Right. Do we have any questions, comments, or feedback? Looking around, and Councilmember Page.
Hi, thank you for this. I guess the question I have is, so are the budgets that the departments are going to be working on, what they present to you, are they contingent upon what we decide based upon the FST recommendations?
Absolutely, yes. So they will, at some point, they will hear what all your recommendations are, and that's what we'll be incorporating into the budgets, definitely, yes.
And I guess the other thing that I was thinking, I know you said, well, I know they only got 2 weeks to do this, but it's only a preliminary. However, I'm thinking to myself, the question that popped in my head, is it really only 2 weeks, or are they already starting putting those plans together and kind of like coming and knocking on your door saying, well, what do you think about this? And, blah, 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 blah.
There are actually departments that have already started that, and so there are questions that are coming up. The very preliminary is just to get them going and to kind of understand. We'll have instructions for them. It's a new process this year, and so I know there will be a lot of questions, but the preliminary is just 2 weeks just to kind of get the feel of what they need and for them to, ask us questions. And then it does go through the whole summer. And the very final one is due in September, so they have several months to prepare it.
And I'll be transparent here. My grandmother used to always say, I asked the question if you already know the answer, but I really wanted this to be documented so that the city, our residents, can see how, even though this normally happens in the summer, because everyone here in this building is serious about what we need to be doing about the budget, that they've already started that. And I think it needs something like that needs to go on the record so that they know how hard everyone is working, right now to make sure that we need to be where we need and not waiting till the summertime to get started. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Others with feedback? Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll be quick, but I just wanted to echo thank you. I appreciate us starting this process so early, and I appreciate such a thorough and comprehensive overview. As somebody who likes to start here before we get into the details, it's super helpful for me. And then I guess I would just ask one question if we were to go back to the slide with the December dates on it. I assume that preliminary meeting, it's optional, a potential vote for the budget, but at some point before the end of December, we do have to vote and pass on the budget, correct?
Absolutely. By December 31st is the law that it needs to be passed in order to continue for the next year.
All right, I just wanted to make sure it's not an optional.
Right. I guess on December 3rd, it's optional, but by the 31st, yeah, it's not optional.
All right, fair enough. Thank you, I appreciate it.
The 31st is a Thursday.
Thanks, I was going to say that is incentive in case you didn't want to spend New Year's Eve here in council chambers. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Where's your commitment? Other. Fair enough. Others, feedback, comments, or questions? I'm seeing none. Look at that. You get to head out into the evening. Thank you both. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we will move forward with a review of the fiscal sustainability recommendations, and this is with our Deputy City Manager. And the floor is yours when you're ready.
All right. Well, I am joined tonight by our city manager, Jeff Knighton, and our finance director, Sergey Salmonin. We have been working on this as a team, along with our communications manager. Okay, this is it, right? Can we see? Oh, we can't see this. Go ahead.
So I'll go ahead and get started and walk through the first couple of slides before turning it back over to Carolyn. Thank you again, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. So as you know, we have been working through working with the Fiscal Sustainability Task Force in order to develop recommendations for you to consider. And the purpose here tonight is to share the options of the proposed budget strategies. Those include reducing the redundant ERP and software subscriptions, historical budget savings, and then reduction of the general fund by 5% over the next 2 years. And we will share what further reductions would look like if either council or the community does not support one of the proposals before you this evening. So our agenda for tonight is an overview of the challenge, which you all have seen several times, but we want to make sure that we share that with you again. And then details on each of the proposed reductions as far as the task force's preferred option that they've shared with council. And then what the reductions look like if council decides not to use portions of that preferred alternative, including potential parks district. So for an overview of the fiscal challenges, I'll turn that over to Carolyn, and she can continue the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So the changes that are necessary to fill the budget gap will require good communication with the community about fiscal and/or service changes. The changes are beginning now with internal reductions such as cost-saving measures, evaluating new revenue ideas and partnerships. And the FST recommendations were based on the most recent financial forecast from the fall of 2025. So here you can see that baseline forecast. It showed an annual deficit of $4.2 million per year through 2030 and an additional increase in the following years for a total of 5.4 million through 2035. And over time, on the left-hand chart, you can see red and green dashed lines. You can see that our reserve goal falls below our minimum threshold in 2027 without corrective action. And then to address the gap and to increase our reserve level, ideally to 20% as opposed to 5%, we're looking at increasing or reducing expenditures and or increasing revenues to the tune of $4 million a year, and then in 2030, an additional $2.3 million a year. So our Fiscal Sustainability Task Force, who you heard from on February 26th, provided some recommendations, and they shared those in detail with you. Just wanted to give you a quick overview that they tried to put together budget packages that combined several types of budget strategies. Those that were expenditure controls or shifting costs away from the general fund, service delivery changes, revenue enhancements, and service level reductions. They did provide you with two potential packages, a preferred and an alternative, that do provide a combination of those budget strategy types. So the major changes or differences between the two budget packages are highlighted in blue on the table. So in the first budget strategy package, there is a recommendation to use 100% of the property tax banked capacity, add a TBD or Transportation Benefit District sales tax, and the difference in the next version is using only 75% of the property tax bank capacity and implementing a license tab fee instead of the sales tax for the Transportation Benefit District, and eliminating a police position. Both of those strategies or those budget packages do achieve the goals as demonstrated on the following charts and graphs. They will bring our general fund into balance and increase our reserves. So our primary goal tonight is, as Jeff mentioned, to walk through the details of the preferred package and talk about contingency plans if some of the actions don't occur. And I wanted to say that the details of some of these measures, we didn't have a chance to go through it with the FST. We talked at a high level about what 5% reductions might look like, but they just ran out of time. And so this was something we were hoping to cover with them, but they didn't have a lot of time to weigh in on this. So we're going to talk through this with you tonight, and these are primarily recommendations from our leadership team. So you can see here that bank capacity would add 2.4 million. The sales tax would add 835,000. That would have to be dedicated to streets. There's this internal cost allocation model, which is how we pay the general fund for services that the utilities use as they are operated as enterprise funds. And then reducing software subscriptions or costs in other ways, eliminating historical budget savings. That would be a $150,000 goal, increasing revenues from our fleet partnership of $30,000, and reducing the general fund expenses by 5%, which would add up to $1 million over 2 years. Each of these has a different timeline. We'll talk about those here as we move along. So the first, and I'm calling this the preferred package details, phase 1, and then the contingencies are phase 2 through 4. So hope you can follow along. So in the historical budget savings, we ended up finding more than $150,000, almost $703,000. And we found this by looking at, first of all, we looked at 2 FTE positions that haven't been filled in a couple of years, so we can just remove those from the budget so that nobody has the bright idea of using them. Reducing professional services in the city manager's office. That would be some projects that we ended up not doing, so just some unspent money that we won't carry over. We're looking at, in property management, there were some extra costs for maintaining the Snow 911 building and extra costs for utilities like gas and electrical for our entire, the 7 buildings that the city runs and streetlights. So those could be reduced. We also had some duplication of expenses across departments, so we dove in and found some of those in employee appreciation and a miscellaneous line item in recreation. And then building rental fees are things like when we use somebody else's building and have to pay a fee. Then in streets, we had a couple of ideas. One, more broadly in Public Works, the director and I have been looking at the allocation of staff there. And every staff member in Public Works has some kind of allocation between the general fund, which is development review and streets, and the 3 utilities. And so over time, it's always good to just check your numbers and make sure you're allocating people correctly. So we've been doing that, and in streets, we think we can move $72,000 into other accounts outside of the general fund. There was a duplication in professional services with the city manager's office, so we'll remove that. And then last year during the budget amendment process, we decided to move $150,000 of general fund subsidy from the capital program back into the general fund. So I'm happy to pause if there are any questions on this before we go on.
Seeing none.
Okay. So going to the next slide, just a reminder, these are cumulative. So they're in, sorry, we're in the next, never mind. We'll get to that. So here we go. Software subscriptions. We're still in phase 1. Our goal was $50,000. We're actually going to reach that goal. We had new information about one of these items. The last one on the list is actually going to save about $5,500. But really what we were looking at citywide is, are there duplications in software programs? And are there any programs we're not using that we could get rid of? And are there any other kind of efficiencies that we could take? So their 2 efficiency items are Adobe and Bluebeam are similar but a little different. So some people are more comfortable using Adobe, and engineers tend to use Bluebeam, but it has similar functions as Adobe. So making sure we don't have people with both programs and that we don't have any extra licenses. And then removing the hotspots from laptops, like the ones we have all around the table here today. Tonight, we can still have a hotspot, but we just use our cell phone for the hotspots. So that removes some costs. Any questions about any of these reductions?
I'll jump in.
Okay.
I'm just a caveman lawyer question here. So in terms of that hotspot, is that something that's already going to be taken care of? Like, I've never really thought about it. I go home with my laptop, I open it up, I get to work. But then I was hearing maybe I won't be doing that very soon here. Instead, I'll have to connect to my Wi-Fi, which somehow is still okay. So please.
Yeah. Your laptop will work fine with the Wi-Fi, but if you were in a place where you had no Wi-Fi or you didn't trust the Wi-Fi, you might use your hotspot instead. And that's how the hotspot would work.
Yeah, you essentially turn the hotspot on your phone, and that is your Wi-Fi for your computer. The computer wouldn't connect to like 5G automatically. You would log into your hotspot on your phone like you do a Wi-Fi anywhere else.
No, I get that part. But when, I guess, is maybe what I'm asking. Has that already happened and I don't notice?
Yeah, April 6th is when that'll happen.
Oh, so it's coming up. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I should write that down. So, because I'll on April 6th be going, what happened? Armageddon, everybody down. Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Matsumoto Wright.
So we need to have our phone with our Mountlake Terrace laptop together at all times?
You do if you think you might have to use your laptop outside of Wi-Fi. So if you go to a friend's house or something, or a family member's house where you already have Wi-Fi logged in, then you won't need your phone. But if you go to a conference, for instance, and you don't want to use the conference center's Wi-Fi because, for whatever reason, then you need to have your phone with you.
Okay, because I usually have my laptop or my phone, but now I have to have both.
I appreciate the question. You are not alone. See, look at that. Councilmember Page.
So just looking at this, so the goal was 50,000 in reductions, but we're already at 48,529, right? Is that what I'm?
Yeah, we actually are at 50,000 because we got some new numbers after we published this. So the hotspot is at $5,500.
And on the historical budget savings, the goal was 150, currently at 702. So I guess the question that popped in my head recently was were our goals high enough? Because we found the money, that was already sitting there to save. I know there were some things that you did that you completed, or evaluating, but were our goals high enough?
Well,
for these things?
yeah, the Baker Tilly came up with the overall goals, and then the strategies that the FST looked at, and then the FST came up with some other goals, and so together they looked at a combination of over 30 goals, I believe, or 35 strategies. So this was the bare minimum to meet the threshold for this year. We could go further, and as we get further into the presentation, you can see what those reductions or revenues would be if that's something you wanted to take. One of the original budget strategies from Baker Tilly was to reduce our general fund revenue expenditures by 10%, and the FST felt like 5% was more reasonable. So as we look at the contingency plans, you'll see what additional cuts or revenues would look like.
Okay.
Okay, so to the point that we found more reductions in historical budget savings, that reduces the amount for what we were calling 5%, and the goal was 1 million over 2 years. So it reduced that number to 528, 529. The staff came up with a couple of revenue proposals here, which would, some of these we'd have to bring back to City Council with much more detail, but just wanted to get your feeling on if this is something you want to learn more about. Those include increasing permit fees, mostly for the bigger developments, and trying to make sure that our single-family homeowners are still applying for permits and that we keep our code compliance in check. We talked, one of the budget strategies was increasing our fleet rates with the City of Shoreline. That is here on the table. We also discussed Parks and Recreation are thinking of adding picnic shelter rentals, so that could generate some revenue, and also charging for other public spaces like the plaza outside of City Hall if private folks wanted to use that. So those are some revenue options. Another thought here was our real estate excise tax can be used for a lot of different things. Historically, the city has used REIT between the parks and the streets capital fund. The state law does allow for a portion of the REIT to be used for operations. So this proposal would be to move some of the funds from the street capital program into the operations fund to reduce the general fund subsidy. So we're currently subsidizing streets about $690,000 a year. So we're just trying to bring more general fund money back. And then the last item on this list, we've already done. We had a person leave their position, a rental coordinator position, and when they left, we reduced that position from a full-time benefited position to a part-time position. Any questions, thoughts, comments?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So when we, let's back up to taking into account this and the historical budget savings. So the historical budget savings of $700,000 roughly reduces the need for, potentially, for 5% reductions to about, what, 700,000, 700,000. And so that would be what we're looking for is maybe 3% instead of 5% budget reductions. So a couple of things, I guess. One is, and I shared my concerns earlier, increasing permit fees. While I'm not opposed to it necessarily, I do have concerns about it because what we're trying to do is attract development and grow a vibrant community and town center. And we're seeing a lot of projects struggle right now in finding financing. And while in a normal economy, perhaps, it would be a different situation. We wouldn't have to worry and the developers wouldn't necessarily have to worry as much about, a few extra $1,000 on their project. They'd be able to build that in and make things pencil out. I guess I'd be concerned about, especially in the current environment, and we don't know how long this is going to be the situation, where it's just difficult for investors, for developers to find financing for their projects and being able to make things pencil out. And so I guess I'd be interested in seeing some numbers, potentially an example of what that would mean for some of the projects that we have in the works. So so there's a concern. The real estate excise tax, I am a hard no on because those dollars are one-time revenues that are meant for capital projects, which are one-time projects. So I'd be very concerned about, and I recognize, there's a lot of different moving parts, and you can, and the law was very clear on that up until a few years ago for only going to capital projects, and there was a reason for that hard line. The state had drawn previously. They, in the last, 5 years or so, they've allowed for some of that to be used for maintenance. So there is a portion of that that can now legally statewide be used for maintenance, but I think there still needs to be very strong concerns on doing that, primarily, again, because those are one-time revenues. That's a one-time sale, and those dollars should be going to capital projects. We also have a backlog, oh, by the way, of capital projects that need to be done, and we're underfunded with our capital projects. So by taking away those dollars from those capital projects and shifting them to the general fund, we still have a gap in financing our capital projects. So that would be an area I'd be very concerned about tapping into the real estate excise tax. I could go on that, but I won't. You get the idea. So with that, I guess I'm interested in, and I guess the other thing that I'm looking at when we look at those 5% reductions, those aren't actually reductions in the general fund. It's more raising additional revenues. So it kind of goes more into it in my mind, raising additional revenues or cost shifting. So what I'm really interested in finding more on is real budget savings or cuts or reductions of 5%, or in this case, because I think we found a lot of that. I guess a lot of the historical budget savings that we talk about, I would put into the budget reduction changes. So I guess it's a matter of definition in some way, but you're combining them. So I would reallocate those dollars from the historical budget savings into the budget reductions of to meet the 5% goal, and try and find some additional savings in the budget to get to the 5% would be my take on it. And in doing so, and we're going to get to some more areas of consideration and what some of that means. I would look at some of those other areas, not all of them, because I'm guessing that we don't need to make up, when we get to that point, the $2.4 million or whatever, $3 million. We aren't going to need to find ultimately it's going to get to 6.6 million, right? And we're not going to need all of those reductions to be able to get there. But I think there are some potential things that we can consider to help us get to the 5% reduction. And part of it is, negotiating with the unions on the contracts. Part of it is working in the regional collaboration and finding administrative savings in working together with our surrounding jurisdictions. Part of it can be, there's going to be, artificial intelligence, AI, and potentially being able to use that to help streamline and reduce some costs down the line. That's going to need to be worked into potentially some of the union negotiating contracts. So now's the time to start thinking about that and incorporate some of those thoughts into how we go about doing that, and in identifying, getting us to that 5%. Thank you.
Others, comments, feedback, questions? Councilmember Matsumoto Wright.
Thank you. I just wanted to just add a clarification for the REIT money. That is real estate excise tax. When you sell a house, a portion of that goes into the REIT funds. And we never know year to year how many houses are going to sell. So it goes up and down. So it's not a income that we can depend on a regular basis. And that's why it just goes into capital, because it's one-time money going to one-time things. Brian and I really worked on this a lot about 20, 30 years ago. And so I think we still feel the pain of us having worked on this at the state level. And, but, again, I can see, now that I'm in the city side, I can see where some of the cities don't have any capital projects coming up and they have all this money sitting there. Again, it's what we have to kind of just work around. But it's just one of the things that a couple of people on this council are very passionate about. So I just wanted to just clarify that. Thank you.
Others, comments, feedback, questions? Okay, before we move on, I think you were actually asking for direction on these. Did you want that? I would want to make clear that as it stands right now, we only have one voice on the table, Mayor Pro Tem, saying do not move in that direction, and no one else has spoken. So I want to make sure you realize if that's what you just heard. That would be my expectation. So anyone care to counter what you've heard? Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess maybe a clarifying question. I mean, I think we've got a long way to go in terms of kind of all of the pieces of this. And I mean, I guess I'm happy to weigh it, but I guess I would prefer, my perspective is I had planned to weigh in more holistically after we had had a chance to review the proposal as a whole. So, I mean, I can, but I also think because there's so many moving pieces, it's a little, at least from my perspective and how I was approaching thinking about talking about this, like I don't have, because this work has gone through the work of the Fiscal Sustainability Task Force and we've had a lot of public engagement, I am not a hard no on anything. I think all of these things are here because we have real challenges and we have to figure out the right mix of things to ideally move forward. And I guess for me, it feels easier to talk about that as a collective whole than kind of as a slide at a time. So I guess I'd be curious what others think. Me not weighing in does not necessarily mean that I agree or don't agree, but I guess I was just planning on reserving my comments till later.
And that to me is good enough to make sure our city hears that. So,
Okay.
because again, that wasn't what I had heard as the question, and wanted to acknowledge that. So that stated, anybody else need to jump in one way or the other? All right. I will just personally weigh in before you move forward and say I'm under the same impression. I would prefer to hear what this looks like for no other reason than it's not like this is the last time we'll be in this situation because we live on this planet still. So if nothing else, let's see how it looks, see it all shake out, and then move forward. So that stated, please continue.
All right, thank you. Yes, I was just pausing at each slide because there's a lot of information. So I just want to make sure you don't get caught in the details. So while we had some different goals and we came up with different numbers, in the end, we came up with enough to bridge the gap. And like I said, we didn't figure out the internal cost allocation plan yet, but we did account for an extra $50,000 here in this proposal. So certainly, like we've heard tonight, we'll talk further at the end of the meeting, but there are things we will bring back to you, and I just want to make sure that you have a chance to absorb some of the other data before we get into those discussions. So the contingency plans, these are the first one, phase 2, is if we don't take the bank capacity. The second one is if we don't take the sales tax or it doesn't pass. And the third one is if we don't do some sort of levy lid lift, whether it's an MPD or some other kind of levy, or it doesn't pass. So I made them cumulative so we could see the worst case scenario. Really, we all hope that that doesn't happen. But also by doing that, it gives you a kind of a priority list. While the lists that you'll see are alphabetical by department, I'd have to go back and kind of work with the team to reprioritize lists if that's something that you want to see. As Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Wall mentioned, if he wanted to see more cuts in the 5%, we'd go through this next list and come up with like what the next priorities would be. Also, if you were interested in the alternative of doing the 75% bank capacity, I would go through this list and bring it back to you next time with a different proposal for what those would look like. This was a team effort, and it took quite a while to get here, so just didn't want to shortchange anyone on the team for understanding what their priorities are to provide the levels of service that you experience from all the different departments. So 2.4 million. That would reduce filled FTE positions by 12. And we'll go through this list here. We would be laying off about 3 FTEs in the city manager's office, reducing our wellness budget, not completely eliminating it. That's something that supports employee wellness and organizational culture. We have some newsletter reductions, printing it only twice a year instead of 4 times a year. Citywide, we'd be looking at reductions to all of our training, meeting costs, and supplies. In community development, they'd reduce their consulting services by $25,000. That's in support of development review. In CD, they would eliminate 2 positions, in finance 1 position, and in parks 3 positions, both maintenance and professional areas of the staff. And then we'd have some reductions in our equipment repair budget, reducing our supplies for parks. And then as we move into police, we'd be looking at extending the time that we keep our equipment and replace it. So it's not a complete savings, but it spreads the costs out over time. We would be prioritizing bookings and reducing 1 commissioned officer and 2 non-commissioned staff, and reducing our training to just mandatory topics. We also rent or allow other partners to use some of our buildings. We have our 911 partners at our operations facility. They started paying us rent a couple of years ago, although it's quite discounted. There's room to increase that rent to market, although that is not how we typically treat our partners. At the Mickey Corso Clubhouse, we entered an agreement with the Lake Ballinger Center to offer senior services there, and we do not charge them rent, which is typical. Most cities do provide free space for senior programs. We could increase that to something. It wouldn't be market, but that is something to consider. We could also increase our fees for recreation programs and child care services. And so these are things that we'd have to bring back to you with more detail. But really tonight, it's about like what things are resonating with you that you'd want to learn more about, or what's a hard no. So this is phase 2. If you want to ask me any questions about this one before I move on, I'd be happy to entertain.
Anyone, questions, comments, feedback? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So reduce newsletter printing 50%, so we'd currently do quarterly, right? Mm-hmm. So that would just be biannual.
Yes.
Just twice, okay.
Yeah.
I'd be very concerned about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yep.
And I think it's, I guess And, charge rent for Mickey Corso Clubhouse, I think that, we tried that with a senior center in the group previously. They were not able to afford it. I think if we did try and collect funding for that, we would lose them out of our community center there, and I don't think we want to do that. So I think that would be a concern. I mean, I think there's several in here, and then childcare fees. I think we need to expand childcare services, not reduce them. So I guess I would be concerned about that in particular. I think increasing fees for recreation programs, we have kind of talked about, and I'd like to explore that one further, as far as particularly for non-residents, and trying to find, is there a way to increase, recognizing, what did we say, it's like 70% of users are non-residents. So trying to take a closer look there and figure out, by increasing fees on non-residents, how far can we go before we start seeing a loss, or, seeing a reduction of people using the services from outside. So anyway, there's that cost and demand thing.
Yeah.
But I would be very interested in finding out more about that as an option. I think the Snow 911 space seems appealing, but I think we want to, at the same time, we want to be a good partner, so we want to find the right balance with Snow 911, figuring out how to balance out our needs and their needs to make that work without ruffling feathers. I mean, I think there's other areas in there that I when we talk about laying off staff, I think we need to talk in terms of services. So, for instance, we talked about this as far as like parks. What does that mean for reducing park staff? Well, it means not picking up the garbage. It means not mowing the lawn as many times. It means, less quality in our parks. And so I think we need to define some of those things a little bit more.
Yeah.
To understand what the actual impact is. It's not just, tossing somebody out the door. It's not only tossing somebody out the door, but it means our parks aren't as usable, right? And so I think we need to kind of define that. Same thing when we talk about like the police, and eliminating the commander position is another one of the options, and then potentially other positions, and then the administrative staff. What does that mean in services that are no longer we're no longer able to do, or potentially putting a greater burden on our staff, the remaining staff, something still has to get done, but that means that we're doubling somebody's workload or something like that. So I think those are some of the things that we need to have a little more information on.
Yes, and after I get through the details of these tables, Jeff will talk a little more. There's several slides where we'll talk about some of the impacts, and obviously, if you want to get in more detail in the future meeting, we can do that as well.
Thanks.
Yep, Councilmember Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question, not to be answered now, but just I'm curious. When I looked at this list, the things that caught my attention were the newsletter printing. I agreed. I think that would be really detrimental to our residents. And then the other thing I was thinking about was, it looks like, I was just looking at the kids' crew fees for childcare. It looks like it's resident, non-resident, but I wonder if there's been any discussion about having more of a tiered model by income. When I have registered my kids for YMCA camp, for example, it's an honor system, but you do it by, if you can pay more, like this is the cost, they tell you this is the cost where you break even. If you can pay more, please do, because it helps subsidize other people. So I wonder that as an option as opposed to just resident, non-resident.
Okay, thanks.
That's all. Thank you.
Others, comments, feedback, questions? All right, seeing none, we'll end with mine. It seems criminal not to point this out. 6 figures are the only things really worth looking at, in my opinion, and staying away from laying off staff. Of course, it's last. on my list of ways to proceed. That said, looking at reduced training, travel, meeting costs, and supplies, $123, almost $124,000, that does seem like worthy of exploration in more detail. For no other reason than this doesn't have to be a edict for the rest of time. It could be, well, in this next 2 years, we're only going to do online trainings versus we're going to travel to DC, stuff like that. So without knowing why that somehow is six figures, I would at least want to pick that apart a little bit. And I presume, similar to my question a couple meetings back of, are some of these you're going to do anyway, that falls in the, we were going to do that anyway, for no other reason. That's a pretty sizable number, I would say. So comment, not really a question. That said, you're welcome to keep moving forward.
Thank you. Okay, so phase 3 is, again, cumulative, building upon the list we just went through. If the TBD sales tax is not approved or doesn't move forward for some reason, that is $835,000 that we need to look at. So this proposal would remove 5 more staff or full-time FTEs. So we start out in the city manager's office with a tech item, just removing our phone support, our priority phone support from our telephone system. Our IT department right now maintains our phone system, but if there were a major catastrophe, we would not have priority service. So that would be a savings of $6,628. We have a layoff in community development. In engineering, we would probably be seeing less development review at this point with fewer planners and potentially higher fees. So just that's about an 8% cut in our engineering costs for development review. We have another reduction of staff in finance and in park maintenance. We'd be reducing our park maintenance supplies, our irrigation on ball fields, and in police, we'd be reducing overtime costs, which we already did a pretty significant reduction in that a couple of years ago, but just tightening the belt a little bit more. In property management, this one is reducing our budget for maintenance and emergency repairs. That one, we always try to build in a little padding there because that is where if we have, like we've seen this year, the pump break at the pool or an HVAC system fail, those parts are $15,000 to $20,000. So how can we respond quickly? So we pad that budget a little bit for those unexpected things. If we don't have it, it just means we have to come to city council and get approval. It just might take more time. Custodial, we have some reductions in custodial supplies and purchasing small items of equipment. And then in streets, which is really where we're trying to make the reductions, but we've already taken $175,000 out of the $670 subsidy. So here we are reducing 2 staff members, maintenance staff members, materials of about $55,000. That's like asphalt, concrete, paint for the roads, lighting fixtures, signal equipment, those kinds of things. And contracted services. And so those are, tree trimming. It could be utility locates, geotechnical services, things like that. In recreation, we were asked to look at some options where we're reducing programs because we do subsidize recreation about $900,000 a year. And so it's hard in recreation because it's an enterprise fund and we're making money on most of our programs. And so even though like preschool, I have the numbers, serves about 50 children, and we, charge a fee, we make some revenue on it, but we do only subsidize at $20,000. And then in dance, we have over 100 students. Sorry, I gotta find my notes. I just lost my page. 115 students a year in dance, and that's subsidized about $20,000. And council had made a decision to subsidize youth registrations across the board and in aquatics. So that's kind of where those numbers come from. So we make more money, we spend more money, but it's a balance between the revenues and the expenditures.
Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. And just a question, Deputy City Manager. The reduced postage, I'm curious what that is, given we don't send out recreation materials anymore.
Yeah, that is, I do think they do send something. Anyway, I was told that
okay,
they're
maybe.
still doing some mailings and.
Maybe they do a or like a postcard still.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's right. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I appreciate that reminder.
Councilmember, or excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just kind of going through some of these again. The preschool, I would say, is a huge concern about dropping that. I think that is critically important for our community. The dance one, I don't know about canceling it so much as maybe looking at, some of the other reducing the subsidies. And kind of, pulling that all in together with the full recreation program fees and taking a closer look there. But I guess if it's a popular program, why take it away just to save a few $1,000s? It seems, anyway. And I'm wondering on some of these other ones, is there a middle ground? Can we find some savings, some savings in some of these areas, but not the entire amount? And particularly, I'm thinking of, again, kind of getting back to the regional collaboration, trying to find ways to be working, what jobs, duties, services are we providing that everybody else is providing that we could economize somehow? Or fit to scale, or, so maybe, and so it just seems like there are a couple of areas in here that it seemed like those are some of the things we've been talking about in the regional collaboration meetings. Maybe so there might be some savings that we can find in some of these areas that we're working together with others, so just.
Yep. Yeah, thanks for those comments. I can guarantee you that we are looking at partnerships pretty hard. I think the challenge is that, and so, sometimes we will make some revenue, like we talked about the street sweeper last meeting. That's in a utility, so it wouldn't affect this budget process here. But at some point, depending on how much service you're providing, you will have to hire another FTE to support that. So yes, we'll make some revenue, but it won't be as significant in a lot of cases. And we do find value in it. We think it's we're on board with that, and we are looking at various types of partnerships right now, so.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, I guess. Right, I mean, there's some things where we have to hire some staff to take on some additional duties that we're getting revenues for, and then in other cases, we're able to send some fewer dollars, we can make some reductions and send send some dollars to another jurisdiction too. So it goes both ways, but I think and also I think, Edmonds in particular, I'm thinking of, and I think most surrounding jurisdictions are finding themselves in a position where they're having to make some deep cuts. And we're now in that same position where we're having to consider some things. So now's a good time for us to explore, instead of cutting, 5 people here and 7 people there and whatever, are there duties, responsibilities that can be shared? And so we're not making, we're all having to reduce the amount of money that we're spending, but we're still able to work together in, so instead of cutting a full-time job, I guess, we're cutting 75% of it, and they're cutting 75% of it, and we're pooling services. Anyway, just trying to figure out how to explore those options.
I totally understand. It's complicated, and it takes time to,
Others with comments, question, or feedback? All righty. Before we move to P4, just wanted to make sure those following at home, P3 is again on top of P2. So all of P2 would have happened. So this is an additional 5 FTEs, if you will, in P3. Just want to, I understood that. Just want to make sure folks realize that this is the cumulative effect. And so as we move into P4, let's see what remains.
Okay, so P4, this was the proposal to create a city-only MPD that would cover all of our recreation and parks costs. We could decide to do that as a levy instead. It's the same impact as far as financial impact. If that doesn't happen, either we choose not to do it or the voters vote it down, that would be a $2.1 million reduction. Ideally, those reductions would all be in recreation and parks, but we've already taken some of those. So because this is cumulative, we had to take some other reductions. But if this was a standalone reduction, we would focus on parks and recreation. In this batch, we have removed the recreation pavilion. We will close the recreation pavilion. And there are 38 FTEs in that reduction, as well as a facilities maintenance person who would be focused on that work. We'd also be reducing our expenses on facility maintenance there, which is over $500,000. And we would be looking at some other staff reductions in the city manager's office, community development, finance, and police. And just so to give you a little perspective, because we have a lot of part-time employees at Recreation, 38 FTEs is 108 people. And 14 of them are full-time. So this is a heavy burden. We love the Recreation Pavilion. We've heard that resoundingly from the Fiscal Sustainability Task Force, from the community meetings, from the branding project. And of course, we have one of the biggest recreation programs outside of Seattle. So.
All right, questions, comments, feedback? All right. Seeing none, we will keep moving forward.
Okay, so I'm just going to summarize real quickly.
sorry, actually.
Yes, yep.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking forward to the other slides for discussion to try to figure out if now's the right time or if I should wait. I guess I'll go now. Because one of my concerns, it actually goes back to the P3 and P4, is this. The sales tax, just a reminder that the sales tax, the TBD, Transportation Benefit District sales taxes is a voter approved, right? And so would be the Metropolitan Parks District and Parks Levy. That means two different ballot measures at a time that we're going to be facing a number of other ballot measures from other jurisdictions over the next couple of years. Plus, that's not even considering the rec pavilion, the need to go to the voters for the rec pavilion, depending on what we decide to do there. So I'd be very cautious about sending how many ballot measures we're sending to the voters, and if we do, recognizing that we may not get a yes. So we can't count on these budget recommendations, or, if we say, hey, you know what, we're going to do all of these things, and oh, by the way, half the dollars we're counting on in forming our budget is going to be based on voter approval that may not happen. So so my caution is on how many ballot measures we're looking at, and my suggestion would be recognizing the discussion and the reasoning behind our task force's recommendation for the sales tax rather than the $20 tabs. Remember, the $20 tabs is council-manic, not voter-approved. So we would be able to, we'd know better what we're getting into if we went that direction. But the flip side of that is that it is still an impact on the residents. It is still, and it has $500,000 less revenue coming in. So just some food for thought that I guess I'll throw out now as opposed to later. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap up on this slide and then hand it over to Jeff. I just wanted to summarize the FTE reductions and tee Jeff's conversation up for you. This is cumulative, right? So you can see in the various columns where staff are reduced, and the historical budget savings are unfilled FTEs, all the rest are filled. And we would be reducing our staff by 50%. This, any staff removal in this plan would require other people to take on that work. So in the end, we're talking about reduction of levels of service, the speed at which we do service, and risk in not fulfilling our duties according to the law. And so I'm just going to hand this over to Jeff to talk a little more about those things.
Thanks, Carolyn. So we have summaries of service impacts for each of the offices, each of the departments throughout the organization as part of the presentation. And you can see there in phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 what the impacts are, and that'll be true throughout the rest of the slides that we'll talk about here, what the service impacts are. So city manager's office, we will have a much more difficult time communicating with our community. As part of the reductions, we'll have a much reduced budget there, including some of you talked about the reduction in the amount of times that we send out our newsletter annually. We will also have one of the things that concerns me the most about this particular impact is our ability to address public records requests. And you guys have all had the training related to that. Essentially, Washington's sunshine law is the strictest sunshine law in the nation, and there is no insurance if you mess it up. So any mistakes in that area can be very detrimental to not only this year's budget, but future budgets. Is the part about the phone system. Now, obviously, we don't have phone problems very much anymore, but when we do, I think it's very nice to have a spot in the priority queue to get that fixed so we can communicate with our community as well. So if you want to move on to community development. So the impacts here are much more significant as far as the economic development kind of leg of the stool, where one of the things that is most important to people that are interested in investing in our community is the speed at which we can process permits. They typically want a firm timeline in order to receive their permits. They know what their carrying costs are going to be for whatever financing package they have to develop their property. So reduction of staff in the community development department would hurt in a number of ways. One, reputational. It's one of the things that we heard over and over again about how fast we're able to get permits out, how accurate the comments are when people receive those permits. But also, you know, if there is somebody that is interested in investing in Mountlake Terrace, we want to make that process as easy as we can. Reduction of staff in these positions would cause that to be much more difficult. We're not going to be able to process permits at the speed we do today, you know, as far as giving people appropriate timelines, making sure the comments are accurate when they go out to those folks, out to the potential investor the first time, is incredibly important as far as our reputation as a city. And a place that is open and welcome to, you know, have new people coming here, which is a big part of the comprehensive plan vision you adopted last year. So that would hurt pretty significantly in that area. In finance, I can tell you, and I know it's very important to a lot of members of the community, our passport service. Not that that position would go away, but that position is going to be doing other things. So we wouldn't be able to offer passport services any longer in phase 2. And the elimination of these other positions, much of the future impacts I'm going to talk about, and just to go back to community development for a second, but this is true across all departments, a lot of the work that we do, including comprehensive plan, housing action plan, all those types of things, are things we have to do, not only required by law, but for the future of our community. The housing action plan is incredibly important. Reduction of any of these positions doesn't mean that we can just not do that work. It means that one of the other employees that are left is going to be responsible for doing that work, and they won't be able to do it nearly as quickly, potentially as thoroughly, and provide a good end product and a good roadmap for the community to follow as we move forward with developing your vision. Same is true for finance. A lot of the things that we do, and we've talked about Serka and her team over the last year about how much work they have done over the last year and a half to get us back to where we're supposed to be. And, we've done that, and Serka and her team have done a great job of that. With impacts to the finance department, it would be much more difficult to prioritize the work that we currently have in order to stay on track, but we wouldn't be able to make any innovative adjustments going forward, I think is the most important aspect of that service cut. As far as what parks mean, what people in the community see, they will definitely see impacts from community development because people get a permit for their deck or they get a permit for, those kind of things. People live in our community, and it will take longer in order to process those things. But it is especially true for parks because that's something people drive by every day, walk by every day, see every day. And essentially what this would mean in the parks area are, grass that is brown, it's not well taken care of, no or few garbage cans in the parks. Potentially, if the restrooms in our parks are able to remain open, which is a question, they will not be cleaned and kept as well as we do now. Those types of things. One of the things that we're known for, I heard it described as our identity, as our park system and our pavilion, and they just wouldn't have the same. We wouldn't be able to maintain the same level of identity as the pride that we take in those facilities today and those assets today. So. As far as what people are going to see on the ground.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Jeff. Just going back to the last one, on parks, wouldn't it be more appropriate in phase 4 to say not no impacts, but I mean, we're basically eliminating our parks program.
Essentially,
right?
Yeah, they're gone.
Yeah.
That's why phase 4 has no impacts, because they're already gone.
Well, I guess I would say.
Yeah, we could phrase it differently,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
I mean, no impacts, like, oh, hey, well, let's go with phase 4.
Phase 4, yeah. Well, and that's, excellent point. I mean, but that's why we have that no impacts there, is because they're essentially eliminated already. But we can definitely
indicate that.
Phrase that way, yeah. Property management, as many of you know, you've taken tours of our facilities, you've kind of seen what's happening, particularly at Public Works Operations. That building is, there is a need to plan for, maintenance and capital upgrades for that facility. Under phase 2, 3, and 4, there would not be an ability not only to plan ahead and take care of what we currently have, but for any capital programs to upgrade our Public Works Ops facility or any of our other facilities, including the pavilion itself and other areas. You hear from me about the pavilion regularly, and I would expect that number to increase. Number of contacts from me about the pavilion increase over time, and that will definitely be felt by members of our community. Again, because going back to the park system, facilities takes care of a lot of our buildings that are part of that. And it's a sense of pride. It's a part of our identity. Recreation, again, the same story there. Phase 4, Carolyn shared that would essentially be no more recreation program in Mountlake Terrace. And, phase 2 and 3, there are, phase 3, there's no impacts directly related to phase 3. But again, phase 2 has those impacts. It's kind of follow on is the way we set this presentation up so you can see the cumulative effects of these things. On our police department, that would have a significant impact with our police and our community safety programming. As you may know, many of you have probably heard that Washington State has the fewest number of officers per 1,000 in the nation. Whether that's a good metric by which to judge public safety, not something, that's part of the debate this evening, but I think that when you're already low, and Mountlake Terrace is already below the average in Washington State. I believe Washington State is at 1.37 officers per 1,000, if I remember correctly. Mountlake Terrace is just a little above 1. Our response times are great, and our police department is extremely professional, but any degradation of that service, particularly while we're growing in population, and we plan to grow in population over the next 20 years, would be difficult to contemplate. And then you can see that in phase 1 there, phase 2, I'm sorry, phase 3, reduction in training to mandatory topics. One of the things that that we pride ourselves on is making sure that our officers are trained in the de-escalation tactics and also the ability to serve with a scout or a embedded social worker to work with members of our community that are in crisis. So reducing that training, I don't think, would be beneficial in that area in particular. And it's not like we can stop policing. So the officers that remain will be required to take on additional duties, just like every other department in the city. So we're spreading our folks more thinly. Public Works, there are quite a bit of impacts there on our streets. Some of our streets are already in a place where I think they could be better, to put it mildly. I think that's an understatement, anybody that's listening to this. So a reduction even further in an inability to take care of issues as they arise on our streets not only causes problems today, there's an exponential impact here, because once a street goes past a certain level of PCI or pavement condition index, it can no longer just be repaired. It has to be fully dug out and replaced, which is a huge cost. If you remember several years ago, many of you were here, we redid 66th Avenue, which people definitely remember. It was not a fun road to drive down. Redid that from 220th north to the interurban trail, and not a long stretch of road by any means. And that was several $1 million just for that one small segment of road. So the more you reduce maintenance activities on our existing streets, the more likely it becomes that those streets come to a condition like 66th Avenue was before, and you have to spend a whole lot more money in order to bring those roads back up to a useful condition. I know that's broad, the exact impacts, but just to demonstrate what these impacts and what these reductions would have on the people of our community is, things that you see regularly, roads and parks, things that you use regularly, roads and parks, and we would not, in any instance, be able to maintain the levels of service we do now or improve them, which is something that we would very much like to do. And Carolyn, I'll turn it back over to you for implementation.
All right, thanks. So first of all, I want to preface this by saying we are happy to come back for more work sessions. So after I go through this timeline, I just want to mention that although that is not specifically on this timeline, we are happy to come back and talk about some details of things that you tell us that you're interested in. We have an opportunity to go to the public with some meetings, if there's some things you want to test with the community, like we have some ideas but want to get more feedback on them, or if you want to use that time to share decisions that you make so people are prepared for whatever changes we're proposing. If we decide to go with the TBD license fee increase, that councilmanic $20 increase, that decision would need to be made before June because we need time to get that in implementation. That alternative we would want to be collecting in 2027. Let's see. Oh, in November, if we decide that we want to take the banked capacity, we would vote on that as part of the levy increase that Sirke will be bringing to you. And then, of course, we have our budget that will have a lot of these changes wrapped into it in November. And next year, in kind of April or July, depending on which election we want to target, if you want to do the TBD sales tax, we would have to vote on a resolution before at one of those in one of those months, April or July. The goal would be to be collecting those fees in 2028. And then if we want to do an MPD or some sort of levy lid lift, the idea would be to go to the voters in 2028 to give us a buffer in case it doesn't pass, to go again. And also it takes a year to collect those funds because we get the property tax in 2 increments a year. And so we need to have that revenue in our hand by 2030. So that's sort of a high-level overview of some implementation steps. And like I mentioned, we don't have a strong recommendation today. We're here to bring back more details as you decide you need them.
Questions, comments, feedback? Councilmember Page.
I guess, you know, some of the stuff that's going through my mind is, you know, layoffs, for instance. You know, what we're looking at is some really tragic numbers here. And, you know, the thing about layoffs is, you know, they create exodus from those who remain. You know, we talk about all the extra work that they're going to do, that we're going to tell them you have to do, but they also get the decision to decide, I don't want to do it, you know, and then now you have to replace them. And so any budget savings that you're trying to gain from layoffs, you're losing it just in the rehire process, in the training process. And you know, that's a pretty big deal. The idea of levies, you know, that scared me. We've seen around some of the other cities around us what has happened when one levy failed is just a, you know, an epidemic within those cities once the first one fails, you know. And then and the thing that I always bring up all the time is, you know, whether it's here or, you know, where I work in Shoreline, is what are all the other levies? The schools are always asking for something every year, and the county, and, you know, it just goes on and on and on and on. And at some point, and everyone talks about, well, you know, it's $1 here, $5 here, or 30 cents here, but all of a sudden that pie, you know, is overstuffed and filling. And so those are things that I think that we have to be, you know, really mindful of, because at some point, someone's going to say out loud, well, what's next? You know, and all I can help but think is, you know, if we do, and I don't know what the right answer is right now, but, you know, we've got a 4-year plan and you know, a 20, 30-year plan for growth. And I kind of feel like if these things don't happen, then that growth is out the window, because you're eliminating up to 50% of your staff, more or less, and all of that energy, I think, goes with them. You know, the energy from the developers, the energy from maybe even some of our state legislators that want to help, that are helping us now, see that, you know, we are taking away from, you know, what we said we're going to do, and instead what we was going to do for our residents. So why not just go look somewhere else and work You know, as you know, Mayor Pro Tem is very involved in the region. You know, that there's a lot of cities trying to do what we're doing. You know, as far as growth, we all got that mandate, and you know, the money goes to those who looks like they're working the hardest at it. So, and the thing that I think that I would like to see is that, you know, what we've seen is the impact of, you know, if we don't do these things, here's the impact. But I'm curious as to if we do these things, what is the impact? You know, like for instance, the bank levy, there's going to be an impact. You know, there's a whole bunch of things that if we do them, there's going to be an impact. And what does that look like? And because that's got to be part of the sell. You know, it has to be part of the sell. If we do a metropolitan, what is the impact? Along with everything else, what else is there? You know, I like to see that too, because I understand we need to put this out there, but we need to give, you know, our residents the big picture, you know, so that they can see everything has a pro and con, you know, so we need to see both sides of the pros and cons for each side to see what does it look like. That's what I would like to see. Okay.
Councilmember Doyle.
A little bit of overlap with Councilmember Page, but to the last point, we have to make the cause and effect here like exquisitely clear for residents. Like this, I see whatever package is chosen by us and by the voters, there's a lot of voter education that goes into this, because a lot of people are not going to watch 1, 2, or all the meetings we have, right? It needs to be very clear that obviously you can vote how you choose, and this is the impact. So it would need to be easy to understand, repetitive, maybe postcards to residents, things in here, things in social media, like a massive communication campaign. Because, you know, I think we've all voted last minute. We're going through the voter's guide. What is that levy? What is it about? And we don't want our residents to be there the day before, you know, they have to vote with trying to go through it and trying to muddle through it. I would love it if voters, when they open their voter's guide, they're like, oh yeah, the city's already told me about this several times, you know, and they have an idea of what the impact of their choices are, and what the costs are. So they understand, okay, you know, so a resident can think, I understand I understand how much this will cost my household. I understand that sales tax is now this, and we're voting to do this. On average for a household, I'll pay X dollars more. And I understand that we're using bank levy. A resident can understand what that is. And for my house, it will cost me $15 per month. Like, that's how people decide. They're not going to watch, you know, 3-hour meetings. But, you know, a postcard to communicate that, I think, will be essential. And then a question. I don't understand all of the technicalities between a Metropolitan Park District and a levy. Is there a preference so far as to what would be presented to the voters, or is that still under debate?
That is a multiple meeting question. I would say that we aren't close to making a decision on an MPD, but a Metropolitan Park District, what the FST recommended was a city-only Metropolitan Park District, which is totally allowable. It is a separate taxing jurisdiction. They can levy up to 75 cents per thousand. The advantages are it's permanent, and the district can also levy for capital. In a city-only situation, we don't need to create a separate organization. The council could serve as the board for the MPD, and there could just be a transfer of funds to this recreation fund to run the programs, or to parks. The levy, I guess the challenge right now with kind of committing to an MPD on that is we're thinking about a partnership for the capital investment of a new facility. And so to create a city-only MPD and then potentially have a partnership a couple years later, we can change it, but it's confusing. Yeah. And a levy lid lift, it can be for a number of years. It could be permanent, but the value goes down over time. Usually they're about 6 years. And those are majority. It's just a simple majority to pass, but you would have to renew it frequently, whatever frequency it is that you set the time for. The value of a general levy lid lift is you can decide, what the parameters are. Is it, so with the MPD, it all has to go to Parks and Recreation. For a general levy lid lift, you could define it. Shoreline uses it as their general fund supplement. They made it clear to the voters almost 20 years ago that they didn't have enough money and it was for the general fund. Most cities don't do that. That's a hard sell. They are really good at communicating that regularly. But you could, we've talked tonight about a transportation-related sales tax, Parks and Recreation. You could do a transportation and Parks Recreation-related levy, and you could accommodate all those numbers that we talked about tonight. So there's a little more flexibility with the levy, but you do have to go back to the voters again to renew.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a follow-up question on the Metropolitan Parks District. Establishing our own and then expanding. If we were to establish our own and then look to expand, do our residents have to re-vote on that as well as the new residents? Okay, so it'd be basically doing it all over again.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Others, questions, comments? Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Deputy City Manager, and everybody for I guess, all of the work that's gone into this. I wasn't here when the Fiscal Sustainability Task Force presented. I did have a chance to watch it, though, and so my gratitude to them for all of this work and all of the public engagement that they put into getting us to this point, and appreciate the additional details that you've tried to kind of work through, because I recognize, it's a significant body of work. And so I want to start there and just share my appreciation, because it is hard to workshop all of this sitting in this seat in a work session. So it is really, really helpful to have thoughtful recommendations that come forward from our community members as we navigate really challenging topics such as this. And this is a tough one. I guess I would start high level and just say generally as I try to do when we have recommendations that come forth from the bodies that we ask to do work on the city's behalf, I am generally very supportive of where they landed. I thought they clearly had lots of thoughtful conversation trying to balance, impact, and that's impact both in terms of the impact of increased revenue and costs to our residents, as well as, potentially reduction in services. I will share my extreme gratitude that they proposed a plan regardless of, they will say they proposed a preferred plan that does not kick the can down the road. And I will tell you, as somebody who has children, that is, and I'm not saying that you have to have children to care about the future, but it's important to me. And it's one of the things that I think is oftentimes the easy solution when you're in these challenging situations. There are all sorts of places that we can make cuts right in this moment that, it could be somebody else's problem 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 2 decades from now. And at least the preferred budget strategy doesn't do that, right? And I'm grateful for that, because it's not right. It's not right. And I think we are here to make hard decisions, and these are hard decisions. So I guess I will go back to the preferred budget strategy I'm generally supportive of. I would echo Mayor Pro Tem Wall's cautioning, and I don't know that maybe cautioning isn't the right word. Actually, it probably doesn't describe what I think, but I would prefer not to have to go to our voters twice to ask for tax increases on 2 different measures, particularly because there are so many different places that they are being asked. Although I will name, it was interesting, I will tell you, as somebody who is now, in my mid-40s, I didn't really recall when we kind of changed some of our structure in Washington State and reduced, our annual property tax increase, maximum, which has impacted city budgets for a long time. But it was interesting in going back and looking at some of that to understand kind of the why, and at least the why is presented in the voter information at that point in time, was not to like permanently constrain all of our budgets, but it was so that voters had a more active voice in how their tax dollars were being spent. I think the challenge is we as a city have then not engaged in those conversations with our community. And so I appreciated Councilmember Doyle and Councilmember Page's, I guess, ensuring that we are thoughtfully thinking about how we're going to have these conversations with our community, because we really have not had those conversations. And I think I brought it up early in this conversation. One of the reasons I supported the Fiscal Sustainability Task Force is because I didn't know where our community was on some of these issues, right? And I'm grateful that I have a much better idea now as we're trying to engage in some of these decisions about at least where that task force and the folks who took the time to weigh in as part of the community engagement around that task force were. And so, but that said, I do think it's easier to understand if we don't have to go back multiple times. I would prefer a levy versus a sales tax just from a tax structure perspective, and I think impact on residents. And so, I don't know, I guess that would be a question maybe for you, Carolyn, in terms of, I guess maybe two questions on that. Like, when do we have to decide, if we were, I guess, when would we have to decide the specific structure of the revenue ask? Is that something we have to decide now as part of this process? And then, well, maybe I'll ask that and then I'll have the second question.
I think for us to plan for our budget, we need to know the direction that you're heading. But the actual decision for a resolution for a tax measure, for the sales tax measure, would be in 2027. And for the levy or the MPD would be in 2028. If you wanted to combine those into just one levy and not do both, then we'd probably be looking more like 2027.
Okay, so we could have that, we could ask the voters. I will say I would definitely prefer to ask the voters sooner rather than later, because again, I don't think we've had that conversation often. And, I think to, Mayor Pro Tem Wall's comment earlier, this is a significant part of the proposed solution, right, of balancing our budget going forward. And, while I am hopeful, based on kind of what's transpired thus far around community engagement and where the task force is at in making this recommendation, obviously we don't know what the ultimate result is, and it would be helpful to have more time than less. So yeah, okay. Thank you. I feel like I've babbled a lot at this point, but I would echo, I think we could get really into the weeds on a lot of these things in terms of yes, I think we should continue to look for cost savings. I think we need to be really cognizant of the impact of the cuts that we've made. I think we've been making cuts for years, and I want to name that. And there are places, there's just not that many places from my perspective, and that's the reason I've supported our budgets is, I don't think, we are spending money in a way that is consistent with our goals and our values. And there's real impact of anything that we cut, right? I think that is mostly where we are at. I think finding cost savings amongst duplications and software efficiencies and those sorts of things, absolutely, we should be continuing to look for that. Partnerships fully support and recognize a lot of these things are going to take time, and we have real challenges we need to figure out now. So I guess I will just go back to where I started, which is, I would support the preferred budget strategy package. I think, there are definitely details to be worked out, and would want to be part of those decision-making processes, particularly where they impact our residents, with kind of the, I guess, caveat that I would much prefer going to the voters once, probably with a levy sort of question, before potentially going out with a sales tax addition. So,
yeah, and just to follow up on your comment about what decisions do we need to make when, I think we can certainly bring back some more detail on these ideas that you've brought forward tonight, all of you. And I think what we're trying to do is this spring get you to agree to a path forward. And that will still mean we have more big decisions to make with you. So we would be bringing back, okay, maybe you decide on a levy instead of the sales tax and the MPD. We would need time to put together this is what that looks like. There might be more community conversations about that. Like, so we have a year or so to develop the details, but we know, like, this is our goal. This is how we're going to do it. This is our financial goal. And so I just want to be clear that there is a decision that needs to be made this spring so we can plan. And then if you do decide on the bank capacity, we'd have to vote on a resolution on that in November. So.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Councilmember Page.
Just to clarify to what you just said, when you say that there are some decisions that need to be made this spring, according to this slide, what we're saying is this spring means the end of this month.
No, we could, in April or May would be ideal for the council to make a decision on what we're presenting to you, the high-level ideas. So we could come back again with some of the details like you've asked for. And although I think we had a review and vote on this last slide, we don't have to do that. We can have another study session or work session on that night.
And I guess this question is for Sergey then, because you're starting your department budgets, I understand they're preliminary, April 1st. Right. So how does, if we're not ready by the end of this month, how does that impact the various departments, or that's for either one of you, impacts the departments on what they're trying to build?
So we'll be starting in April, and that's just preliminary, and we'll be working all the way through the summer, so we can make some changes. It's, of course, we would rather know early so that the other things that we're looking at, so we can make that budget balance. And, yeah.
Okay.
So, but there is time also.
Okay.
Yeah, when Carolyn mentioned May, I mean, we really get rolling, as you saw in the presentation earlier, really get rolling on the budget in June. Like summer is the time when all of this stuff happens, between June and August, for us, before we come out to the community. So I would say, you know, middle of May, very latest at the end of May.
Any other comments, questions, or feedback? All right. Seeing none, I'll just leave in with mine. One, I would just remind us, I thought we did a wonderful job of educating our community when we were doing the RFA, and I would even take this document and see if you can't start to piece that together as just a preliminary high level for folks to start to digest and get their head around. But that said, I also loved everything I was hearing, so echo much of the pathways I was hearing here, and I will just go on record here saying, personally, maybe it's the eternal optimist in me, I'd rather look at a levy than something permanent, because again, I was going to remind us that we're right on the brink of something which changes all of this dynamic, and I'll use as an example, this as an early part of this. I was going to wait for the council comments, but I'll put here. There are potential pathways we haven't even considered yet that we don't know about until, an example would be our library here. They are going out to vote. And, you know, as you pointed out, we need to know these types of things, who else is going out, because every penny matters. But if they're successful in their venture, they would be in a different position to come back and ask us in terms of perhaps taking ownership of this property down here, which wouldn't bring us any money, but would bring us cost savings potentially, which, you know, those are all contingent upon, but again, just recognizing 2 years from now, the dynamics could be changed drastically, and I don't want to set something permanently in place that might not necessarily remedy itself, but might give us more options down the road. And that's just one example. I'm just saying we don't know what else is out there. That stated, unless there are any comments or other feedback, we will go ahead and move to the city manager's report. And seeing none, I would say we can move forward.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, just a few things to mention tonight. First, we had our second Community Academy meeting yesterday evening, and it was very well attended. People had a lot of fun. They learned about what the rest of the city manager's office does other than me and as council members. So Jennifer got a chance to present on what city clerks do, along with IT, HR, and all the other functions in the city manager's office. So it was a good time. The second bid for the pedestrian plaza is expected to go out March 24th. So we're hopeful to get some good responses to that. And lastly, our summer camp spots filled up quickly within about 45 minutes. So they were gone very quick. And it definitely shows the demand when we're, a lot of discussion today about recreation programming. There is demand there for sure. So that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I think my congestion I didn't hear what you said. What was that last one? What filled up?
Oh, the summer camp slots.
Oh, summer camps. Thank
Within
you.
30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah, I heard
all
that
the
part. I
spots
didn't
were
hear what the
gone.
noun was. That's awesome.
Except for the parent that tried to call it an hour later.
Yeah, I was going to say, hey, I've been in that queue. Yeah, I was going to say, I've been in that queue, man. I don't know what to tell you. Other than, yeah, this would be an example of we should be expanding, although it's unfortunately this conversation today has been about redacting or contracting, I should say. Any comments or questions for the city manager? All right, we'll move forward to, has everyone had a chance to review the March 19th regular meeting agenda? All right, any comments, concerns about that? All right, we'll move forward. And now we'll move to council comments. Any council comments? Looking around, seeing none, I have a handful. One, I want to give us just another somber moment. We had more youth violence over the weekend, gun violence. 2 separate incidences so far. They appear to be unrelated. May they continue to be that way. And coincidentally, 15-year-old and 17-year-olds being involved. So as far as I'm concerned, 2 sets of children playing with firearms. Very sad to say the least, but it's part of a bigger trend that's been going on in this community. So just be aware that out in the community there is conversation among parents, is how I'll phrase that, about what happened to our SROs in the schools. So just know that that's a conversation that is probably going to make its way back to cities. So just priming the pump here for us so that we're not caught off guard, and you can start thinking about that. And that might be just a history of, if I remember correctly, it was around 2019, right before COVID, that we had made that decision. And COVID, of course, everybody going home made it easy to forget about that as a resource or whatever the dialogue was around that. So in that regard, I will just say, I do think it's worth revisiting. Every resource is worth revisiting, especially when this much time has passed. And as far as I'm concerned, can't remember what the actual reasoning was behind that. But then I also want to point out, as I just said about the library could be a capacity, well, this is another example of what this could be a cost. I don't remember what the funding mechanisms were, but I know it begins with a police officer. I know the police department reports to the city, which means somebody's paying for that time, because even if it's a repurposing of time, that's less time for whichever officer that is. They were doing somewhere else. So again, costs are in there, but just recognizing some conversations are bigger than how much do they cost. This is about our kids and, again, gun violence. Second piece, and I will just say I am deeply apologetic here. We have a resident who calls in all the time with concerns about COVID, and just wanted to let that resident know we do hear you even if we don't respond or remember your name. I do remember your name, but it's not coming to me. Thank you, Adam. I was hesitant to say it wasn't something wrong there. It's just my brain today, congestion. But anyway, Adam, just council be aware. I have no idea why this didn't hit me sooner, but the last time he spoke to us, it landed on me correctly, and he tied it to something practical, which is we are doing a wonderful series with the police department. I actually had a personal experience with them doing it separately, so I know it's a great product that the police department is right now putting out in terms of trainings, situational awareness, and fraud, if you will, broadly speaking. And Adam had asked us, why aren't we doing something like that with COVID? Well, cut the story down a little bit, too late. Working with the Snohomish Health Department, and we will figure something out. So we do have the city now connected to the health department, and they will hopefully come up with a series that is on lots of airborne viruses and viruses in general. COVID's not the only thing that's something of concern in our county. And then lastly, I already said this, which is just to be aware that Snow Isle Library is going to be going out to the voters soon, and I suspect that they will probably have some conversations with all of you in their own way about what that looks like in terms of supporting, which is to remind us that we speak as individuals, not as a council, but that's just to remind us we're heading into that season, so you got to make those choices on your own. But do know that we're not doing any of this in a vacuum. People are looking at us, which is a comment on the way out the door to say, I hope that conversation in Edmonds went well. They wanted to look at our financial sustainability task force, so they are still watching probably this conversation because this is the real part, right? They did all that work, and now we're trying to figure out what to do with that work. So just to remind you, hey, if nobody else is paying attention, the people down on the shore are, and proud of that. So again, we're inspiring people as we're making these conversations very public and very transparent, and just very proud of this organization for doing that, and us as individuals and collectively for doing that. That said, any other council comments? Otherwise, happy to let you know we are adjourned. And that deserved a loud one.